As ESPN's Tom Luginbill joins us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. Luginbill joins us by Johnston RV Center's neighbor, Jack's Western Wear, and Western and Outdoor Wear right there in Coleman, just off exit 304. Luke's, what is up? How are you?
I am doing good, guys. Not to get off topic, but have you guys ever experienced a 48-hour period of such great football in your entire life?
No. Not at all. Not at all. And
me neither.
You know, the Dunaway's a Bucks fan. Lance is a Rams fan, so I've had to listen to a lot of this. As you said after that game, always stay deeper than the deepest. And that seems like football 101. How do you let Cooper Kupp run past you in that situation?
Well, it looked like there was a miscommunication on the back end where the safety wasn't quite sure that was the call, so he doesn't retreat. And I think personally, he and the opposite safety that were standing behind when they brought the pressure off the edge, they were supposed to what's called bracket coverage, which means they were going to play in and out. So you had the outside receiver in the slot, Cooper Kupp, and they should just be staying deep. And if one cuts in, one safety takes them, one cuts out, one safety takes them. But the middle safety, though, when you're in that, you can't be peeking at the quarterback. I mean, the last thing you can do is peek at the quarterback and stop your feet. And it just looked like it was bungled for the get-go. I don't think it was necessarily a bad decision for them to bring a 4 or 5 man pressure there. You just can't screw up the communication on the back end. You really can't.
Just great quarterback play yesterday, and loved it for Matt Stafford. But I was going to ask you about the Chiefs and Buffalo. When you've got two quarterbacks that are under the age of 27, and Pat Mahomes and Josh Allen, and guys that you watched and scouted, and, they didn't win big games in college. I mean, Pat Mahomes, didn't really have winning records under Cliff Kingsbury at Texas Tech. Josh Allen, we saw him in, one big game against Iowa. He looked awful. Did you have any idea these guys would be this good?
I don't think anybody did, if anybody's, being honest. I had Patrick Mahomes, our broadcast crew had them twice. And you're right. They were a mediocre team. They were a terrible defensive football team. So he did everything they could just to keep them hovering around 500. And the thing that's crazy about Josh Allen is I think what everybody was banking on with Josh Allen was the physical attributes being so impressive, and the fact that if you go all the way back to high school, every time that guy was doubted, he had to overcome and prove his worth, which he did each and every step of the way. But while he was doing it, he was also injured a lot, and he turned the ball over a lot. So, there's a lot of risk to that. And credit the Bills for sticking by him and believing in Josh Allen and seeing something that maybe some others were doubting that they didn't worry about one bit. And then, Patrick Mahomes, guys, you watch that game, you can't coach some of the things he's doing. I mean, look at those arm angles and look at his ability to ensure that a ball doesn't get batted down at the line of scrimmage. Or, we're talking about 0.05% of our population. There's like 3 people on the planet that could make some of the throws that he was making yesterday. And I'll tell you, the thing that stands out more than anything else, and I credit Andy Reid with really starting this, but all of these guys that are system guys have set their ego aside, have realized that, we can't take college quarterbacks and ask them to be in a pro-style set or ask them to be in a West Coast set. We've got to start doing what they do. And if you notice when you watch the Bills or you watch the Chiefs, if you remove the logos and the uniforms, you'd think you were watching a college team. I mean, that's what they look like. They look like college offenses. And I think that's why you're seeing these quarterbacks flourish, because they're not trying to stick a square peg into a round hole.
Tom Luginbill on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. So what's Alabama getting in Jermaine Burton? Does he have the potential to be Jamison Williams impact-wise in the portal?
I don't think he's that fast and explosive. He's a little bit more of a physically stout guy. I do think that he is an upgrade to their overall roster at the receiver position. And you guys have heard me say this before when it comes to the transfer portal. If you're going to be in the transfer portal, then in Alabama, a team like in Alabama is going to be interested in you. You have to be an upgrade. Like, you have to have enough that the staff feels convinced that you're as good, if not better, than what they're currently playing with, because otherwise, what's the use? Just go recruit the high school level. So I think that's the one thing that I've become kind of impressed with, whether it's Burton, whether it's Jamison Williams, whether it was Henry To'o. I think Jahmyr Gibbs has got a chance to be a Josh Jacobs type of guy. Is Alabama's done a really good job of doing their homework on these guys. Because the other thing, too, in all of this, it's not just about getting better athletically, but you cannot risk your culture. You have to do your homework. You got to find out, why is that guy in the portal? What type of guy are we getting? Is he going to be a locker room killer? Is he going to be a coach killer? And that's where I think Alabama's done a really nice job.
So, Luginbill, two-part question here. What was the bigger pickup in the portal for Alabama? Is it Burton, Gibbs, or Ricks? And the second part, why would Burton leave Georgia when he knows he's going to be in the mix and he just won a national championship?
It's a great question. I don't know if it revolves more around maybe Alabama being a little bit more dynamic at quarterback, maybe Alabama being a little bit more willing to create like explosive opportunities, just because I think of what the quarterback brings, especially if plays are breaking down, some of the tempo stuff. I think that there's some things that Alabama is maybe doing schematically in their offense that maybe he didn't feel like they were going to be willing to do at Georgia. That's just, again, a guess and an answer to a question you asked, because aside from that, you can't sit there and say, well, I want to win a national championship. You just won a national championship. So there's got to be some more personal reasons as it relates to the growth and development in the offense that you think might help maybe enhance your NFL opportunities. It's really the only thing that I can think of.
Luginbill is presented each week by Jack's Western and Outdoor Wear, exit 304 in Coleman. When you're Auburn and you make a coordinator change at this point, you watch a ton of football. I'm not going to pretend like you know the Jeff Schmedding breakdown. I mean, you've probably watched some of his games, but he's far from a household name. But it's obvious that Derek Mason and Brian Harsin weren't on the same page, and Harsin goes to a guy he's more comfortable with. What does that do for Brian Harsin and for Auburn?
Well, if there's a comfort level within your staff that you didn't have previously, it's going to allow you to feel more confident that as a head coach, if you've got to step away or you're not going to always be in the room, that you feel like you're philosophically aligned with your coordinator. And if that's something that Brian Harsin did not feel from the get-go was the case, regardless of what type of coach Derek Mason is, you could have personality differences. You could have philosophical differences that maybe don't manifest themselves until you start getting into the staff room, you start getting into spring football, and you start getting into practice plans. And now you kind of get a better feel working day in, day out with a guy that, hey, maybe this isn't quite the right fit. So I do think comfort, convenience, being aligned philosophically and from an approach is a big deal. And if that's something that was that big a deal for Brian Harsin as the head coach, he's got to do, listen, that's a program that's got a lot of fixing up to do right now. And so he's got to do everything he feels he can do to put them in a position to start making some strides and showing some improvement.
My goodness, USC. Shane Lee, Alabama linebacker last night. Travis Dye, Oregon running back. Yeah. Already had Mario Williams, linebacker. Romello Height from Auburn. The vacancy sign is open in L.A. We expect Caleb Williams at some point. Can it change the face of USC football in 1 year like it did for Michigan State?
Not until you start reeling off names that play in the offensive line and the defensive line. So far, you haven't. And that is the problem right now at USC. They are so below average up front on both sides of the ball. It's staggering. And when I say it's staggering, I'm saying, I grew up on the West Coast. I remember my dad coached in the Pac-8 and the Pac-10. And when you grew up and you're watching West Coast football and you're watching USC was in a different class up front on both sides of the ball, and that is no longer the case. So we can talk all we want about adding receivers or adding a linebacker or, adding a corner. But to me, it's all about the front people. Now, are they improving their roster? Absolutely. Are they getting some better players? In a Mario Williams? Absolutely. But I don't think that's where the focus needs to be. The focus has to be up front for SC. And the problem is there's no kids out west at the high school level that are difference makers. And I think what Lincoln Riley's going to have to do, if he wants to make them a college football playoff contender, he's going to have to go national in recruiting offensive and defensive linemen, because right now the West Coast doesn't have them, and that kind of puts them behind the 8 ball. No matter how many different players they get at skill spots or at quarterback, they got to get better up front.
Before you go, can't remember, are you an Ozark guy or not?
Oh, yeah. I just finished episode 5 last night, so exciting. I know season 3 of Servant just got launched on Apple, so I got to get back into that a little bit. There's some good stuff. Streaming
okay.
Right now.
We'll get a letter grade on season, or the first part of season 4 from you when you finish all 7 episodes. We'll get that next week.
Awesome. Sounds good, guys.
All right. Thank you, Lugs. Have a great week.
All right, boys. Take care. You too.
All right. See you, ESPN's Tom Luginbill on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. He joins us each week, courtesy of Jack's Western and Outdoor Wear, exit 304 and Coleman. Jack's Western and Outdoor Wear brings you Tom Luginbill.